Welcome to the weekend edition of Front Office Sports Today, brought to you by Invesco QQQ. Invesco QQQ is the official ETF of the NCAA. The future isn't scary. Not realizing its potential, however, could be. To build a championship team, you don't just look at what you've got. You have to realize the potential of each recruit, transfer, and prospect. Only by seeing the potential of one player do you make the team its strongest. Let's rethink possibility. Invesco Distributors, Inc. Invesco is not affiliated with the NCAA. In this episode, our writer David Rumsey looks at how the SEC isn't dominating the college football rankings, but is dominating the media picture. Yahoo and CBS sports analyst Adam Breneman examines some of the biggest narratives from this season with just a few games remaining. Before all that, let's look at this weekend's most expensive college football games according to TickPick, all of which feature some fierce regional battles. The fifth priciest game by average ticket cost is the Battle of the Aggies, featuring 7-2 Texas A&M hosting 2-7 New Mexico State. This is a must-win for Texas A&M, who are currently 15th in the official rankings. An average ticket for that is $153. Fourth place is just a little north of there. Colorado continues to draw some major excitement. They face the Utes, who narrowly missed a major upset of BYU last week. The Buffaloes likely need to win out to have a shot at the playoffs. That ticket averages $196. Staying in the Southwest for the third most expensive game, which has the third-ranked Texas Longhorns headed to Arkansas to play the Razorbacks. Getting in there costs around $211. Or, if you're in the Midwest, you could spend $1 more to watch Ohio against Northwestern. That one is not at Northwestern's usual home at Ryan Field, it is at Wrigley Field. Ryan Field is getting demolished to make way for a new stadium, so fans will get to watch one of the best college teams in one of the best baseball parks. All those tickets look nice and cheap compared to the most expensive game of the weekend, that being number 6 Tennessee heading over to number 11 Georgia. Big implications for both teams in that one, and getting in costs an average of $535. Up next, my colleague David Rumsey takes a look at that Georgia-Tennessee game and how the SEC has been able to stay the biggest media draw despite the Big Ten doing better in the rankings. Here's our conversation. Joined now by Front Office Sports newsletter writer David Rumsey. Welcome, David.
Hey, Owen. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, great to have you on. So Georgia is playing Tennessee this weekend in one of the major matchups. What's at stake here for the Bulldogs?
Yeah, so after last week's loss to Ole Miss, they now have 2 losses on the season. And I think, in my opinion, and a lot of experts' opinions, a third loss would mean probably no more chance at making the college football playoff unless there's a lot of more chaos, craziness that happens. In this new 12-team expanded college football playoff era, I've kind of been talking about this and chewing on this as we get into the late portion of the season, that we have games like these that are effectively playoff games or elimination games for either one or both teams. You know, last week we had Alabama and LSU both trying to avoid getting that third loss, and now Georgia's trying to avoid getting that third loss. Tennessee only has one, but the number 7 team versus the number 12 team, who's going to make it into that final 12-team playoff bracket? It's really exciting, and big ratings are probably ahead as well.
Yeah, definitely. It's probably the biggest matchup of the weekend. And yeah, speaking of ratings, this is another SEC match that is just likely going to perform really well. It's been kind of at least the big conference for television this year.
Yeah, absolutely. Disney had their deal expanded, and kind of a new deal started with the SEC this year, adding in that game of the week, if you will, that used to go to CBS every week. And, Disney is paying up for it, about $300 million annually now, that they're going to be paying for just the rights to have that top SEC game of the week. But what it's done is it's given Disney, which owns ABC and ESPN, obviously, it's given them the ability to just kind of run the table with these huge SEC matchups each Saturday, from the 12 p.m. window to the 3:30 p.m. window, all the way into prime time, which is where they're putting most, or if not all, of their best games that are getting these huge 10 million plus audiences, which is why that Disney and ABC now have 12 of the top 15 most watched games so far this college football season, if you're looking at the ratings. So, and pretty much all of them are SEC games.
Yeah, it's an interesting situation where the SEC is clearly the top media conference right now. It brings in the most viewership by a pretty wide margin. It's only the second best football conference to the Big Ten when you just look at the rankings and who's won more games. Do you think the SEC can hang on to its position as the most watched conference, even if it's the only the second best football conference.
Yeah, that's it's a bold take there, and I think a lot of SEC fans might want to take you up on an argument there as far as it being the second best football conference. But your point is well taken because as things stand right now, after 11 weeks of the college football season, if you look at the CFP rankings, you are right. You have four teams from the Big Ten and SEC each ranked in the top 12, but those four teams from the Big Ten are in the tied to the top five. Only Texas is at number three from the SEC, and then the SEC has four teams as well, but kind of spread out through the rest of the top 12, if you will. But yeah, it's interesting that the SEC is able to keep drawing these huge numbers. I mean, they have attractive matchups, right? But what ABC has been able to do is, since they have all the rights to every conference game, they're able to stack it, noon, 3:30, 7:30 in prime time, where they're getting a lot of these 10 million plus audiences, like we've talked about. And when you look at the Big Ten, that's their media rights are spread out amongst three networks. So you have Fox and you have NBC and you have CBS. So I don't know if that's contributing to, maybe not everybody getting as big of a rating, or if, there's only so much to go around. I mean, the Big Ten does have two more teams than the SEC. The Big Ten is at 18 teams and the SEC is at 16 teams. So there's a lot of factors at play, and it's just really interesting.
It'll be interesting if to see. I mean, obviously these media deals are set now, but Disney being able to have the whole conference. I wonder if more conferences are going to take that strategy going forward of trying to sell everything to one network. Seeing that Disney's kind of been able to make the conference. Don't know if I should say punch above its weight, but certainly max out on what it's got.
Yeah, it's an interesting proposition, and I think there's test cases for why it could succeed or not succeed. Obviously, it's working out this season for ABC at least, right? Having all these rights for the SEC. Now, Disney also owns all the rights to the ACC, and I guess they're playing second fiddle on those networks to the SEC, and that's kind of messed the ACC up because they're locked into those deals. I think through 2036 or something like that, at a lower rate, not bringing in as much revenue. And that's why you have teams like Florida State and Clemson taking legal action in the past 12 months to try to get out of those conferences without paying huge exit fees, because they know there's not going to be enough media revenue coming in until for at least another decade plus. But then, like we just talked about, you have the Big Ten that separated its rights. And even though this year the SEC is getting higher TV ratings than the Big Ten is bringing in more money annually, actually, than the SEC. Those deals with Fox, NBC, and CBS are worth about $1 billion, if not a little bit more per year, while the SEC's deal is closer to like $700 or $800 million with Disney. So who knows? Maybe they just got a bargain. But if you're looking to maximize revenue, splitting it, a la like the NFL does, as we've seen, the NFL splits its TV rights to anybody that will pay up, and numerous partners and new ones this year with Netflix. So definitely some interesting strategies there.
Yeah, I mean, and yeah, easy for me to sit back here and say like, well, they should just do that.
Yeah,
Whereas, you get this wrong and you might lose your conference. So yeah, it's a high stakes decision, and you only get to make it every few years. Putting your eggs in multiple baskets, seems like the safer play. But if you can line up with, Disney, CBS, maybe throw NBC or Fox in there, a major network that
yeah,
has major distribution, a good streaming network doesn't hurt either. That's who you'd want to line up with if you're gonna sell everything to one partner.
yeah, yeah. I would totally agree. And some of these deals are a really long time. Some of them are not so long. I mean, the Big Ten, even though it just kind of started these deals last year, it'll be up for renewal at the end of this decade. And we know these media companies like to negotiate early, get to market early. So there'll be no shortage of conversations to be had about which conferences, which leagues will be going where next.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we'll be tracking every step there. David Rumsey, thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Owen.
Next, Adam Breneman knows college football as a player and now an analyst. He looks at the major narratives of this CFP season as we head toward the finish line of the first ever 12-team playoff. He joins us next. Joined now by Adam Breneman, analyst at Yahoo Sports and CBS Sports. Welcome, Adam. Great to have you back on.
Yeah, appreciate having me on. A lot to talk about going on in college football, man. It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the end of the regular season is on the horizon. Obviously, this year is different from other years in a whole lot of ways.
Yeah.
One of the big ones that we're feeling right now is a 12-team college football playoff. Um, how do you feel teams and programs have kind of like changed how they operate, given that now there are 12 spots?
A couple of ways they've changed. The biggest one, I would say, is how teams and programs have to build their roster to win right now and win in year one. When there was a 4-team playoff and you didn't make the playoff, it was kind of okay, right? Only the top 4 teams. Listen, if we're number 18 in the country, missed the playoff, not a big deal. Playing a good bowl game and everyone's still happy. You got a shot at it next year. Think of a team like a Penn State that hasn't made the playoff, but won the Rose Bowl and it was really close. Everyone was happy and okay with that at Penn State. Where now you have to make the playoff. Like a 12-team playoff, if you're a top-tier program, there is no more excuses. Like you have to make that 12-team playoff. So Deion Sanders said this the other day in a press conference, and he's spot on. He said, the time for developing players in your program is a thing of the past. There's no more development going on. It is about getting players in your program that can win and win right away on day one. That development piece has really become even a smaller piece of college football. A big-time coach told me one time, college football is 75% talent acquisition, 25% talent development. It's now changed. I'd say it's like 90-10. So the teams have to set up to win right away. And that means you don't take as many high school recruits. You're taking transfer portal players because you've seen those guys. Can they play at the Division I level? And you bring them into your program, and you got a better chance to win right now, right away. So I think that's the biggest way it's really changing, and it will continue to change how these teams acquire talent and make sure that their rosters are set up to win right now. When I was coaching at Arizona State under Herm Edwards, I'll never forget, he said something about, we were evaluating an offensive lineman recruit, and he said something like, and I made the point that this is a great player in the future, right? He may not be good day one. He's got a lot to develop, but he'll be good in 3 years. And he made the comment like, we may not even be here in 3 years, right? Like we may not even be coaching here anymore. He ended up being right, but so it's like that's the mindset where the thought of bringing in a guy who's going to develop for 3 years and then play. That's a thought of the past. Teams are going to have to recruit via the portal and recruit to win right now and make that 12-team playoff.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And do you feel like that development is it getting lost, or is it just getting pushed? I mean, like we're still early days here; it's a little hard to tell. But is that like getting pushed into high school? Is that happening somewhere, or we just kind of just like taking the cream of the crop and everyone else? Oh well.
It's a good question. I'd say that development is always going to happen in college football, but that development just has to happen so fast. So what it really comes down to is that you can't miss on your recruiting evaluations like maybe you could before, when everyone had 3 years to build their program and everyone got time and coaches weren't fired if they didn't make the playoff in year one. So if you recruited a couple guys in your recruiting class who weren't top tier talent day one, you had 3 to 4 years to turn them into good players. Where now you have to be precise and great on your evaluation on day one, because you need those players to play, especially when you see, if the average recruiting class is 25 guys, we're seeing a lot of teams take 10 of those guys as high school recruits and 15 from the portal. So those portal players have to be good and play right away for you. The other area, you asked how it's really changing things. We're seeing it change how front offices in college football are set up. College football is shifting completely to a pro model. The model of recruiting and evaluation in college football up until really last year has been that the coaches are really the ones evaluating and deciding what players you're going to sign. Where in the NFL, the coaches coach the players, and then there's the front office. You have the general manager, you have the recruiting staff, you have the pro personnel department, and they're the ones deciding who to draft. Like the tight ends coach isn't deciding what tight end that the NFL team is going to draft. But in college, it has been that way. Like when I was coaching in college, every college coach, if you're the running back coach, you decide what running backs you're going to sign at your school. Same with the head coach. Where now colleges are starting to take that evaluation off of the coaches and move it to a pro personnel type department where you're getting where you're hiring a general manager, which has become a huge role in college football. Alabama just paid their general manager $1 million a year, so that tells you how important that Courtney Morgan's his name, one of the best in the sport, how important that role is. General manager in the general manager's scouting department in college are now really handling evaluations and who is going to be signed, where the coaches coach the players and then recruit the players that the evaluation department tells them to recruit. So kind of taking evaluation off of the coaches into the scouting department, because teams are realizing that's a full-time gig to evaluate these players, because you got to evaluate high school, transfer portal, and JUCO kids, junior college. And last point on that is that you're not just evaluating kids in the transfer portal. Most of these colleges now have set up college personnel scouting departments where, just like in the NFL, these college scouting departments are scouting every player on every team around the country, even if they're not in the portal, because the portal moves so fast that when a guy gets in the portal, you don't have time to decide if you like him or not. You have to have a grade on that kid before he hits the portal. So in the NFL, you scout every player on every team in the NFL so that if they get cut or if there's a trade, you have a grade on that guy. Colleges are doing the same exact thing. And think about how many college players these colleges have to evaluate before the transfer portal even opens up so they can move fast.
Yeah, I mean, it's crazy to think about. Yeah, I mean, like the NFL, like the scouting departments, like knowing every player, like knowing who your top college draft picks potentially are too. That's there are entire departments for that. College, it's an order of magnitude bigger, because you've got hundreds of schools. You also have high schools. You have the JUCOs, and so it's kind of it's one of those things that, like, now it's shifting. It's crazy to think that it was just like the coaches doing that, and also like figuring out how they're gonna play the next week. It's a lot of these changes I don't know what to think about, but at least maybe it's a good thing that, like, this job now has more people doing it. Did you have another?
No, I was just thinking about how other ways it's changing. I think the one I've heard you on your show I talk about Indiana before, and what Indiana has done in college football. I mean, they're undefeated, historic season right now. I think we're already starting to see that there's been a trend for a long time of athletic directors and school presidents hiring really young coaches, wanting guys who are 33 years old, 35, that have the energy and can recruit. And then you look at what Indiana did with Curt Cinetti, who was I think he's 60 years old, from James Madison, built smaller programs, and then gets hired at the back half of his career to go to Indiana. And I think we're going to see that be a trend pretty soon, where ADs and school presidents are going to say, listen, we've tried the young coach thing where you hire the sexy young coach, he recruits, everyone's excited, you get the young guy in, and there's some juice around your program. But what about the 55, 60, 62-year-old who built an FCS program into a champion, or built a group of 5 school and is ready for kind of his like statement job in his career, like a Curt Cinetti? I think we're going to see that become a trend in college football too, especially with coaches, especially with programs that need to win right away and want to make the playoff in year one.
Yeah, it's interesting. I just wanted to pull on a thread you brought up in the beginning around bowl games. I remember last year thinking, like, have we reached peak bowl games? This feels like a lot of bowl games, but, like, people still get excited for them. They can, they're kind of like silly and fun, and like then the game itself, like, obviously the players are still competing as hard as they can. Do you think we're like, with the 12-team playoff, is there more risk of like the bowl games just getting like too kind of goofy and no one cares, or is it still people are going to show up and have fun?
It's a great point. I see bowl games still being a part of college football. It's been such a part of the DNA of college football for a long time. Obviously, the bowl games are going to become pretty meaningless as far as what it means for your program. Like, if you're a big-time program and you have a down season and you go play in the Myrtle Beach Bowl, no one cares if you win or lose that game. But it's good for, number one, it gives guys and teams a chance to develop some of their younger players who maybe didn't play, speaking of development, in those bowl games. You get some extra time in practice, and it's great for just PR for the school. Players get to spend some time together, go on a trip. So I don't think it's going to go anywhere. I do think if one thing's going to help the bowl games is, depending on how revenue sharing comes to be in college sports and when this happens, these players will have to sign contracts with the schools. And I'm assuming that in those contracts will be that they agree to play in those bowl games. If they're going to get paid $500,000 a year by the school, you play in every game, including the bowl game. So that will keep a lot of guys, I believe, from opting out of the bowl game and not playing in that final game of the season, which has really been one of the things that's killed bowl games, is that the best players aren't even playing in the bowl games because they're opting out to go get ready for the draft, or, I mean, opting out to go to the transfer portal. So I do think we'll see a little bit better product in the bowl games, but it's all about the 12-team playoff at this point. It's going to be electric. I mean, think of some of these first-round playoff games. You got, Penn State's going to host a first-round game, possibly some of these destination spots that are going to just be electric factories for the local businesses, for the local towns. It's going to be fun to see it play out, and it's just going to make those bowl games not as meaningful down the stretch.
Yeah, that makes sense. Kind of a random question, but I keep staring at Army in the standings, in the rankings, and they're undefeated right now. And I feel like after the whole Florida State thing last year, we were saying, like, obviously people are going to have debates and fights and get upset over who's in and who's out.
Yeah.
When we expand to 12 teams, there's more teams to get worked up about. But at least we won't have an undefeated team out of the playoffs. Right now, there's an undefeated team out of the playoffs. If they beat Notre Dame, maybe that changes. But do they have a case as like they should be in there, or is it still just like the schedule's not good enough?
No, I've said this for a while. I actually call a lot of the Army home games on TV, so I know that team very well. Army, historic season they're having right now, and if Army beats Notre Dame, I don't see a world where they don't make the playoff. I mean, they should jump Boise State, in my opinion, who has one loss. If Army beats Notre Dame and then runs the table the rest of the season, their Navy game does not count as part of the regular season. It's after the playoffs come out. But I mean, it would be a big jump. But man, if they win that game next week against Notre Dame, I don't see how Army misses the playoff as an undefeated team. I think they will jump Boise State as the best group of 5 team. Now they'll have to win the American Conference Championship game to get there. But if they win all that, win the American Conference with a win against Notre Dame, no loss in their schedule, it would be an absolute travesty for Army not to make the playoff. I think the committee would put them in.
Yeah. And before we let you go, who's looking like a best title contender right now? Who do you think is going to take it all?
Well, I'll give you 2 quick answers. The best, I would say, Ohio State and Oregon are the 2 best teams in the country. It's been pretty clear. There was the best football game of the year when those 2 played. I believe that Oregon and Ohio State are better than any of the SEC teams. So I think those are the 2 best teams in the country. And I think one of those 2 will win the national championship. A team to kind of give you like a wild card that I think it really has a chance to make a run at this thing is Ole Miss. I mean, they're playing really good football at the right time. They had a couple tough losses earlier in the season, but their defense is elite. They have a great defensive line. Jackson Dart, their quarterback, is one of the best in the country and is playing really well. Lane Kiffin's got them playing with confidence, and he's put some great game plans together. They got the number 1 scoring offense in the SEC, and their defense is giving up 80 yards a game on the ground. That's a very good combination. And for any of the teams hosting a first-round playoff game, I tell you right now, the one team they don't want to play is Ole Miss. They are one of the hottest teams in the country right now, and I think Ole Miss could make a run at this thing.
Yeah, and I feel like it's like this. Maybe it's sort of I don't know if this is actually true, but I feel like the teams that punch above their weight across sports in the playoffs are the teams that have like a really good defense and can suddenly just like shut down the best teams. Adam Breneman, really enjoyed the chat. Thanks for joining us on the show.
Thanks, Owen.
That's it for today. Drop us a rating and review wherever you like to listen. Most of all, have a great weekend. We'll see you on Monday.